Hey everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And welcome to Tactical and Practical Day. So wake up. You guys know what we do here on Tactical and Practical Day. This is where we roll up our sleeves and we actually use the software. As a sub-series of Tactical and Practical Day, I'm doing something I'm calling AI for the average guy. And as you can imagine, we cover all things AI for both guys and gals in your basic, intermediate, and even advanced levels. So far to date, we've covered ChatGPT, configuring ChatGPT, different prompts using agent mode, scheduling work to come and automatically to you while it's working overnight. We covered Microsoft Copilot, Zoom's AI Companion, Atlassian Jira Rovo, using the AI tool actually inside your project management software and some of the automation rules, having it summarize your Confluence pages for you. And today we're going to expand on that theme of covering AI, and we're going to cover Anthropic's Claude. We're going to cover what they call their co-work and some of the features for that. Okay, so the three things we're going to cover in Anthropic's Claude co-work today are number one, first configuring your system and installing it. Just a note, I'm using a Windows laptop. The configuration is a little different if you have a Mac. I know a lot of people that are running things like ClaudeBot or Moltbot do it on a Mac, but I have a Windows PC, so we're going to configure it super simple, nice and easy on a Windows PC. That's number one. Number two, we're going to configure it to see our files in a test directory. We're going to give it access to that test directory and actually have it do things for us in that test directory. And number three, we're going to use the connectors and connect it to our apps in the example of connecting it to our email and actually doing analysis in our email. So those three things, very simple, are installing Claude Cowork, configuring your system, connecting it to a file directory to run analysis on files within that directory, and number three, connecting it to your app, specifically to your email to run analysis on your email. And in simple terms, before I share my screen, the way that you can think about it is this. You still have all of the underlying tools like your file directory, like your files, like your applications. The difference is these AI tools sit at a layer on top and become the controller. So in the past, you used to need to know what are all the ins and outs of my emails and the rules and categorizing things and how do I use the project management software and what are the ins and outs of these files and directories and permissions and using Excel and PowerPoint and all these different apps. And if you know how to use them, like I know how to use them, then thinking about this stuff might be a little easier. But what I'm suggesting is that as we move forward with these applications, we won't need to know all of the different underlying ways to use the software because we can interact with Claude to control these apps to do things for us. All right, and you're going to see that in a second. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll click share. Share sound, yes. Okay. And do as background and we'll share the screen. And we'll just move this out of the way and lower that. Okay, great. Hopefully you guys can see my screen now. Get rid of that. Okay. All right. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our Windows settings. And inside of our Windows settings, we're going to look for the developer settings. So that's System Advanced. And inside of the developer settings, what's important is the developer mode, install apps from any source, including those loose files. You want to make sure this is turned on. Okay. Once you turn on developer mode, it will allow you to install Claude Cowork onto your desktop. Now, once again, I'm using a Windows 11 laptop. If you have a Mac or a MacBook Mini, I know a lot of folks are installing ClaudeBot or Moltbot onto Mac Minis, it will be a little different. But for a Windows 11 laptop, you have it on. One additional thing to note is that you'll see in a second that when we look at our files, I configured a test directory and a test file, and we only work within that test directory and that test file because that's a good discipline and practice to keep. However, you see here that what Windows will let you do is actually create a development drive where you can do things like separate that out if you're creating different applications and you want to test that inside of your own sandbox, so to speak. So that's an option as well, but we're not going to do anything that intricate. We're going to keep this super simple. All right, so enable developer mode. Now, once developer mode is enabled, what we'll do here, we'll just say Claude. We'll go to Claude, just a simple Google search. We'll open this up. And you can see that it recognizes me. I'm already signed in. If you're not signed in, you can click the install button, install Claude right here, or it'll give you an option. It'll prompt you to install it, and you just click install. Very simple. And this is what it looks like on your desktop. Now you can see here that I'm using the free plan. You can upgrade for about 20 bucks a month, or there's something more expensive, which is closer to 200 bucks a month. But for now, we're just going to keep it super simple and use the free version. You can see that it's not using Opus yet because Opus is the paid version. But for what we're doing, we're okay. So the first thing you want to do, like with any software, is come here on your name in your account and click on your settings. Now within your settings, you see that there's all kinds of ways you can customize things. You can tell it what to call you. You can describe your work function. For example, you can say product management or engineering. You can give it any personal preferences. One of the preferences that I use for all of my GPTs and the ones that we've covered in other videos is what I do is I always tell it, I say, after you've completed your search, before you return the results to me, double check it to make sure it's factually correct. And that is just a general guidance or a blanket preference that I would recommend you use for all of your GPTs. So like I said, we've covered ChatGPT, we covered Grok, we covered Microsoft Copilot, and in all of them, I would recommend that generic prompt to save it, to just say, before you return any results to me, double check to make sure it's factually correct, because these things can and do make mistakes. You always want to check it. Having that additional level of check is good. As you scroll down, you can see notifications, appearance, blah, 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 blah. For now, I'm just keeping most of this stuff on default. I set it to auto. Okay. We're going to skip through some of this stuff and we're going to go right into the connectors. So connectors is on the left-hand side under settings. So you see settings here and then connectors. Okay. As I said in the beginning, I've connected it to my email, my Gmail, and I've connected it to my file system. So let's just take a look at those super quick before we go into them. When we click on these three dots, we could say disconnect if we want to disconnect it. Or if we wanted to connect something new, we would just click connect. Now, that's how easy it is to connect to things like your Gmail, your Google Drive, or your calendar, or even GitHub. Once you click the connect button inside of your Gmail, it operates sort of like a single sign-on type of a fashion. It's going to ask you to log into your Gmail. It's going to prompt you with a verification code based on how you have your Gmail set up with maybe you have multi-factor authentication on like I do. And once you're fully authenticated and you're logged in, you can say, remember my settings if that's something you choose. I did. And now it's connected to your Gmail. And that's it. It's that simple. You can use this with different email services. And once you're connected, you can search within within that mailbox, and I'll show you an example in a second. But that's it. It doesn't have to be super complicated. As I said in the beginning, you're using Claude or whatever GPT you're using, ChatGPT, Grok, as a controller to sit on top of the software and applications to control it as an assistant. The next thing we want to connect is our file systems. So for this purpose, once again, I created a directory and I gave it permission to that directory, and we're working within a subfolder of that directory. So think about this like setting up a UAT, like a testing environment. I would not, and I want to be clear on this, I would not give this thing total access to all your files and your entire file system, because it can and will make mistakes. And I read an article in the news about how someone at AWS, Amazon Web-Based Services, gave it full access, and Amazon went down because it just started deleting everything. Now, I don't know if some of that was in jest or if there's some truth to that. But with anything we do, we always want to install it in a testing environment first, test it before we roll it out into a real live or production type of scenario, a little at a time, slow and steady. So we would click configure. And the first thing we want to do is enable it. Okay. When you go to set this up, it's going to say it's disabled. You just click this on, you slide it, it'll go to enabled. Then it's going to say, what's the directory? So you can see here what I did was super simple. With inside of my documents, I created a directory, Claude. And that directory is the only directory that this has access to. So now you say, well, what kind of access does it have? And I'll show you that in a second. So very simple. Enable the file system and give it access to just one directory, one subfolder for now. As you move forward, you can give it access to more and more and more. Or if you know you're working with a lot of files and folders, you can put those files and folders into that one directory so you know it's contained. This is very important. People use fancy words and they say like, well, it hallucinated. That's a fancy word for saying we don't understand what it's doing or why it's doing this. So keep it contained, okay? That would be my recommendation. All right. And so what have we done? We've said always allow. So you can see it can read files, it can write files, create directories, search directories, yada, 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 blah, 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 blah. You can customize this if you want. You can say, well, I don't want you to be able to write any files. I want you to only be able to read, and I don't want you to be able to create anything. In other words, if it can't write or if it can't create, therefore it can't delete. If you only give it read access, then it can't delete anything. Now, you may want to do that. That's up to you. And you can change that stuff right here. You see always allow, needs approval, or blocked. Okay, so on the right, anywhere where it says write, or it says edit, or it says create, you can have it prompt you first for an approval or say blocked altogether. Because we're testing things, I have it to always allow and access. So if you worked with me in the past, you know I am the king of UAT. I'm generally in control of testing UAT, getting all the stakeholders together to show them evidence of how things are working in UAT before we hand it off into production. And so when we're doing things in a testing environment like I've simulated here, we can have a little more access, a little more control. But when you move into production or in real life scenarios, you want to change these things around, maybe to need approval or blocked altogether. All right, let's go back. Okay, so once again, we've connected our Gmail by clicking the connect button and using just a very simple single sign-on, so it's always connected. And then we've configured our file system to a test directory, and we gave it read-write permission to that test directory. Let's now go to our chats. Like we've talked about in other videos, chats have a specific purpose. don't have a laundry list of 100 different chats here. The great thing about these AI assistants, these GPTs, is that they have context. And the more you can separate out a chat for a specific purpose, the better use of the context you get. So let's say you're working on project A, B, C, X, Y, Z, or you're working with client 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you have a specific chat just for that project or just for that client, and everything else is put somewhere else, and only that client's information or only that project's information is in that chat, the context will get better. The AI will remember, and the interaction is smoother and it's better for a better output. And so what we'll do is we'll go into the email chat to start. Now, I did all of this the other day for the purpose of speeding up this video. So I'll show you. In other words, you don't have to wait for me to prompt it, wait for the return, and then see all the back and forth with the editing of the prompts. Although there aren't a lot of edits, if you take the perspective that you don't look at this as an agent, but you look at it as an assistant, I believe that it'll work better for you. And so what I mean by that is in my mind, when I think of like an agent, I think of like some 007 autonomous agent that can to like go into any situation and take it over and get it under control. When I think about an assistant, a virtual assistant, I think about how do I actually interact with my virtual assistants? And I've had virtual assistants in Argentina, I've had virtual assistants in India, and I interact with them very simple. I keep it simple, I keep it structured, and I do one thing at a time and I build on that. And if you keep that mindset, then when you prompt or you ask it a question and then you build on those questions, you'd be surprised at just how accurate and how good it can get. So let's go into this example of this email chat. And what I said was, okay, please connect to my Gmail now. Now, the reason why I did that was because after I connected it, like I showed you in the connections, it didn't recognize that it was connected. So I prompted it twice for it to check it. And after that, then it realized, oh, okay, now I'm connected. Now, the good thing is that's only a one-time setup, and it is a little quirky. You would think that, well, I've connected it in the connections, I've connected it in the settings, it should just be connected, and it should. But remember, like you're talking to an assistant, just simple at a time and then build on it. So I had it check the connection. It checked it, it didn't recognize it, it checked it again, and then it saw it. So you can see what it said, please disconnect and reconnect. I didn't do that. I just said, okay, it says I'm connected. Let's try it again now. And it did. It found it. mmonfredo82@gmail. That's my Gmail account. So it finds it. And it says, okay, I know that I'm connected. What would you like me to do? Do you want me to read and summarize emails? Do you want me to organize your inbox? Now, just one note, I tested it. And I tried to ask it to organize something specific in my inbox. And by organize, what I mean is in Gmail, Gmail has this concept of a label. A label is just like a folder. It's a way to search. So you might have a label for, finances, a label for personal, whatever your labels are. My email box is very organized. I'm just a very organized person. But I tried to have Claude actually organize my inbox and create a label for me, and it wasn't able to do that. And so I just want to mention that. But what it was able to do that was very powerful is what I want to show you now and why we're talking about this. And so the first thing I said was, okay, great, you're connected. How many emails do I have? And it says you almost have 250K emails with almost 220K threads. Now, my Gmail, just so you guys know, is probably about 10 years old, and I have the paid version, which is only a couple bucks a month. It's very small, just to make sure I have enough space, because I tend not to delete anything. I tend to organize everything. Then I asked it, how many folders or labels do I have? And so why am I doing this? Like an assistant, I'm saying, okay, I gave you access to my Gmail. Can you see my Gmail? Just like I would with an assistant. And so at first my assistant said, no, I don't see it. And I said, check again. And then my assistant said, well, disconnect and reconnect. Maybe the problem's on your end. And I said, check again, because I know the problem is on my end. I connected it properly. And then the assistant said, oh, yes, I can see you're connected. And now I'm basically saying, okay, now that you're connected to my email, let's see what your level of awareness is. How many emails do I have? You got 250,000 emails. How many folders do I have? Right? And what I'm doing is I'm building on this slowly. And remember, like we talked about, context. So for this email chat that we have here, as we build on this through the weeks, through the months, through the years, it'll get smarter and smarter and smarter. What I wouldn't recommend is just throwing a massive prompt at it right in the beginning. Don't do that. You wouldn't do that to an assistant. Slow and steady. No matter how sophisticated these tools are, you want to build on it, a solid foundation. All right? And we're going through, and I'm basically going back and forth with it to say, what are the labels and the sublabels and subfolders you see? Because what you're returning to me is not correct. You're not returning to me my labels in my Gmail, and I had it on another screen. So after going back and forth once or twice, then it starts to see, okay, I can see you have a coaching label, a dating label, entertainment, job search, purchased, Amex, Bank of America, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, great. It can see my total emails. It can see my total thread. It can see my folders and my subfolders. And you can see here, I'm basically summarizing this for you, what I'm showing on my screen, the conversation. I asked it to create a sub-label under my purchase label, and it was not able to do that, which I wasn't aware of. I thought it would be able to do it, but it says that it can summarize things for me. And so what I said was, okay, fine. If you can summarize things for me, and I'm showing you right here, I said, what I want you to do is I want you to go through every single credit card statement I have from Citibank, going back from the origin of the email, and give me just a summary of everything that you see. And so what it did was it only went back from December 2025 to February 2026, and it gave me by month some amounts. So what you're seeing here is it didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do, but it's starting to get there. Once again, building on a foundation. So what I asked for was the life of every single credit card transaction from Citi inside of my email box, because I have my credit card configured that whenever I make a credit card purchase, it sends me an email with the receipt, and I know that already. And I just wanted it summarized in a simple table. And it did that here, but it's not really correct because it only went back for a certain period of time. And knowing what I know, these numbers don't look exactly right. So we're getting there. In other words, you have to check. You have to check the information. All right. Just scrolling down here to save you some time. All right. This is where it starts getting powerful. So now it knows it's connected to my Gmail. It knows how many emails I have throughout the life of the Gmail box, 250,000. It knows all of the sublabels and folders I have for purchased, for Citi, for American Express, for entertainment. It can see all the different folder, the file structure I have within my Gmail. It can see all of the credit card transactions for Citi. So now this is important. Look at what I say here. Based on the entire life of the search history, can you tell me on average how much I spend per month at Costco? Now, I have a Costco Citi credit card. In order for it to know this, it needs to search through all of the emails, through all of the Citi receipts, and only call out Costco. And this is what it does. So it's saying for your Costco Anywhere card ending in blah, 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 here is your January spending average, about 430 bucks. And here is your February average. We were about midway through February when I did this. So it was about 323 bucks. Then it said your estimated average is about $380 per month. but certain months were higher, blah, 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 blah. And so once again, getting good, but not exactly what I asked it for. I said, go through the entire search, the entire life, go back for as long as I had it. And I say it again here. Here it is. So here's the punchline. If you've been building up to this, or if you want to fast forward this, it's saying, okay, I can go back as far as July of 2025, or I can take more time to do the analysis and go back even further. I left it here. I said, this is okay because this happened quickly. And it's saying I can see your average number of transactions. Now, this is incorrect. This isn't the average number of transactions, which I later found out. This is the average number of things or email alerts I got. So the data isn't always accurate, or the interpretation of the data isn't always accurate, which is why you need to check, guys. I just want to be crystal clear on this. You can allow these tools, these controllers, these assistants to run a first level draft for you. You don't need sophisticated software. You don't need custom applications. But as you tweak it, you want to check, because it can make mistakes like this where it's saying, I didn't go to Costco 7 times in August, for example. I know that for a fact. I go to Costco maybe once, twice a month. But it's saying every single time I see an alert, it counts that an alert and as a transaction. Now, once again, you can fix that, but I'm just trying to give you perspective on how to interact with these things. And here we go. $270, $860, $220, October, November, December, blah, 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 blah. So you can see that it's doing a good job of giving me the month, the year, and the total spend, and what it thinks is the number of transactions, which is wrong. And then it gives me a little summary. Okay, average monthly spend, about $460, highest month, blah, 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 blah. All right. And then I ask it, I say, well, how did you come to determine the number of transactions? And then it tells me, well, the transactions are not actually the transactions, but it's the amount of times I see the alerts. Okay, great. And this is where we stopped. So in summary here, you can use Claude to connect to your applications to give you summaries to do financial reporting for you. Regardless of what you connect it to do summaries and financial reporting for you, you need to tweak it and you need to test it and build on it a little at a time. And this is a perfect example right here. It said, I can go back and give you the summary from July of 2025 quickly, or if you want, I can spend more time going through everything. Now, I did this because it was quickly, and the number of transactions is wrong. Now, what you can do in the future is you can create a scheduled event after you've trained it properly, and you might train it properly by saying, well, this is not number of transaction, this is number of receipts. So change that to show the proper header. And yes, run this query overnight, run this query once a week, once a month, and actually give me the monthly spend and the yearly average spend throughout the whole life of it. It might go back 10 years. All right. So I interacted with this. Maybe it took me 20 minutes and I summarized this for you guys in maybe 5. So you can see how powerful that is. The next thing we'll do is we'll go into the files and we'll show you how we used Claude to interact with our files within a directory. Okay, so we're moving out of the email chat and we're going into the files chat. All right. Scroll up just to save you some time here. Okay. So same thing here. I'll save you the details. And I'll show you where it is. Inside of documents, inside of Claude, this is the directory it has access to. This is the only directory it has access to. Within this directory, I created a headcount and budget exercise file. All right. The Claude created all of these files with all of the data in these files for me in seconds, and it created a consolidation file. So let's show you again. So the same prompt in the beginning, just like the email chat for the first time. I said, can you see this directory? It said, no, I can't see it. You're not connected. I was connected. So same thing like you would chat with an assistant. I said, okay, check again. I checked again and it said, okay, I'm connected. Now I can see the file directory. Okay, great. So that's step one, these little tests. Now I said, I want you to create me 6 months of headcount budget files. 6 different files for each of the past 6 months with an average of 100 resources or people per each file with a unique first and last name, and have them allocated randomly across the following projects: AI, cloud, and data migration, randomly assigning the percentage allocated to each person with no more than one person being allocated 100%. Now, the reason why I have it create these files is because this is a very real life scenario. A big part of my job in managing the project or the product rollout is assigning resources. So in this example, if we have 100 people on the team, we need to decide who's working on what. Okay, John's working 25% on cloud, he's working 50% on AI, therefore he's 75% allocated. What particular month is that for? Does he have capacity? Can we put him more on this or less on that? And for all 100 resources, let's look at that. So that's a very real life scenario of stuff that I did day in and day out as the program manager. But what I want to stress to you here is that Claude can do that for you. So just excuse me one moment, guys. I'm just going to pause this for a second. Okay. So Claude can do all of that for you now. It can do all of that data analysis. Now, because this is a test and an example, I had it create the headcount and budget files for me, and it did that in seconds. But imagine if you already had those files, it can run through those files for you, combine those files, do the analysis. It can do all of that for you. So I'll quickly walk you through that. So what it's saying is, okay, great. I'm going to write a little Python script, and I'm going to have the Python script create an XLS. That's just an Excel file. And it's just giving you some updates here. It's doing this very quickly. It's saying, all right, it didn't really do it that right way. Let me redo it. Okay, I generated all the files. Okay, let me just, make sure that they're writable. Okay, great. Now they're copied. And here's a summary of what I did. It did this in less than 2 minutes. It's saying, okay, September has about 96 people. November has about 95 people, blah, 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 blah. February has 104 people. Because once again, I said it go for the past 6 months. All right, then what it's saying is I added some initial data in there that I think would be value for you, which is very valuable that it knew that. It said, I'm saying these are the people that are fully allocated or 100%, partially allocated or less than 100%, or over allocated. And I'll just give you a quick summary. Remember that when you're doing headcount and budgeting, it's important to know who are the resources that are under allocated, because as new work comes in, you can then deploy those resources to that. Now, I know in real world scenario, everyone's 150% allocated and everyone's overworked and they're wearing multiple hats. But when doing things properly and you actually assign people to a project or to a product and you're disciplined and maintain that, it's good, because then when new work comes to pipe, the easy way is to just complain and say, well, more work came in, I need to hire more people. That's the lazy way to do things. The disciplined way to do things is to have proper allocation per each person, per each project, and say, okay, Johnny and his team actually have a little capacity. We check with them. They say, yes, that's accurate. And then we can have them work on additional things instead of complaining we need to hire more people, which is a lot of what happens in real world scenario. But aside from that, all of the headcount, budgeting, and tracking, which we normally used to have to do by hand, Claude can now do for you. All right. And so it's telling you that. Now, what it did here was it said, okay, here are all the files. I've created 6 different files for you. And it's saying, because I'm connected to your Google, you can download it to Google Drive. Because I'm connected to your Windows directory, you can download it to Excel. And that's exactly what I did here. I hit that download all button, and they're all here. Okay. Now, as we continue to prompt and interact, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, great, you gave me all 6 files. I looked through all 6 files, but instead of having to look through all 6 files and look through 6 months of data, can you give me one consolidated file that has everything and has a summary in it? And it does that. And it does that in about 15 seconds. And you see right here, It uses a file system integration, takes all 6 files, runs a couple commands. You can see the commands right here, and it builds one file. And then it's telling you that all 600 records are in one table, one row per month, and it gives you a summary of what it did. And then same thing, it tells you, I'm connected to your Google. Do you want to download this to your drive, or do you want to open this in Excel? And so I'll show you guys quickly what it did. And this is the consolidated file. Okay, so in this all data tab, you can see here it gives you a number, a month, a name, a department, a percent allocated. So 0 on AI, 56% on cloud, 36% on data migration, for a total of 92%, giving you a total status of partially allocated because they're not 100% allocated, and FTE equivalent, or full-time employee equivalent, if you have a sheet that's comprised of FTEs and FTCs. So your employees, your contractors, your consultants, you can have headcount, you can have licensing fees, software fees, and all that for you here. We have a monthly summary with total breakdowns. The analysis it did here, I don't think this is useful, the way that it broke this down. Things like, you can see these numbers are not really useful. The average allocation per person is useful, because what that tells me is that there's only about 80% allocated, which means that on average for September, or for September 2024, that there was about 20% allocation left. In other words, there's more resource to deploy. You can imagine if that was for your current month. So if this was for February of 2026 or current month, if you had something like 70 or 80% allocated, that means you still have about 20% capacity. All right. So that's valuable. Some other things aren't valuable, but I didn't tell it to do that. It just knew to do that automatically. So project analysis, similar here. Let's just move this out of the way. I'll show you some more of the sheets. And we'll randomly go to one sheet here. And you can see that it's the same thing. The number, the name, the department, the percent allocated for November. Okay, so let's go back. All data. Okay. September, as you scroll down, October, November, blah, 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 blah. Okay, what I'm showing you is that what Claude did was it took all 6 of these headcount budget files, and it consolidated them all into this one consolidated file. It gave you one tab with all of the information. That was correct, by the way, because I checked it. It gave you a monthly summary. Not all of the monthly summary was useful. There were some things that were summary, like the average allocation per person, the project analysis on where people were, and then it gave you the original data if you wanted to check that per each tab and having it all in one place instead of inside of instead of 6 files, it's all inside of one file. So go back into Claude, close that out. And just let me put this here. Let's open up Claude. And excuse me 1 second. Okay. So in summary, inside of our files chat, we connected Claude to a test directory only. We gave Claude full access to that test directory, full read, full write, full create, full search access. You can configure that access if you want to be blocked, to only be read, or to stop and ask you for permission every time it goes to write, for example. We then had it create 6 months of headcount and budgeting file of, on average, 100 people per each month allocated to projects like AI, cloud, data, etc. and give us the return of that analysis to see who is under or over allocated. It created that automatically. We then had it summarize 6 months of that data to give us one file to show all of those resources so we can see on average where are our resources? Are they under or over allocated? And are we having 100 people? You can do this with 1,000 people allocated and working on the right things. This used to be a big part of my job as the PM to not only create these files, to keep these files up to date, to consolidate these files, and to give these files to all the different stakeholders and senior management. Now Claude can do it all for you. All right. The other thing we did inside of our email chat here was we had it connect to our Gmail. We had it first confirm it can see all of the total emails. It can see the subfolders, files, and directories. We had it look through all of the financial data for one particular credit card in this example. You can do that per client. You can do that per project. You can be creative with this stuff, and we had it give us a financial summary. It returned a quick summary that was accurate, and it said, if you want, I can give you an entire summary because I've had this account for over 10 years, but we stopped it there. The number of the transactions were wrong. Those were actually the number of emails, but you could prompt it and tweak it and change that. And then what we did was we installed Claude Cowork onto our desktop. We went through some of the settings. We recommended that inside of the general settings, in your personal preferences, one of the things you do is you give it a prompt here that says, whenever you return a result to me, reread that result, do analysis on that result, and make sure it's factually correct. Now, that's something that I'd recommend for every single GPT tool you use, whether you're using Claude, using ChatGPT, using Grok, whatever it is you're using, give it that prompt to have it double check the information to make sure it's factually correct. And then the very last thing, inside of our settings, in the developer settings, this is a one-time configuration. We want to turn developer mode on. That will allow us to install Claude Cowork onto our Windows 11 computer. If you're installing this onto a Mac or onto a Mac Mini, if you're going to move on to do something like ClaudeBot or Moltbot, obviously the installation and the configuration will be a little different, but in this example, we're using a Windows 11 laptop. All right, so I'm just going to stop my screen share for a moment. Okay, there you are. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Tactical and Practical Day, where we roll up our sleeves and use the software. This is the sub-series I'm calling AI for the Average Guy or Gal, where we cover all things AI. So far, we've covered ChatGPT, ChatGPT connections, ChatGPT agents, ChatGPT prompts. We covered Grok. We covered a comparison of Grok versus ChatGPT, which one's better to use for what. We covered Microsoft Copilot, when it's better to use Microsoft Copilot. And today we covered Anthropic's Claude, specifically Cowork. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? What additional AI tools would you like to see broken down in a AI for the average guy way that just your average Joe can get going and use this stuff? One of the things I'm thinking about doing for our next session is actually going into the paid version of Claude and connecting it inside of our extensions, inside of Excel, showing the powerful analysis, inside of PowerPoint, actually creating PowerPoints, inside of our browser, showing it how it can automate things in our browser. And depending on how things are going, I may even show you how to install ClaudeBot onto your own personal server like I did with AWS. I don't know about that one yet. I don't know if that one is really appropriate for AI for the average guy. I would think that installing ClaudeBot or Moltbot would be maybe something more advanced, or people that are more in depth with AI would want to see. But I don't know. Maybe it is basic and you do want to see that. So yeah, let me know what it is you want to see. It would be my pleasure to bring that to you. And thank you guys again so much. Looking forward to talking to you soon. Remember to hustle harder and have a great day. All right, bye-bye.